So, I'm going to talk about material spirituality and spiritual materialism. Now, the interesting thing to me is, this is something I actually want to explain. I'm not just expressing it so I can work on my expression of it. This is something I acknowledge is difficult to explain. And I have to acknowledge that because it doesn't seem difficult to me. To me, I think I've described my starting point as tangibly as possible. That's the whole purpose of it, is taking a tangible approach. But there's a couple things that make it difficult for people to understand. More difficult, I think, than it ought to be. And, the main thing is just the way words strike people's minds and the way a whole frame comes in, and that's all they could do. That frame comes in, and if you say, oh, don't think of that elephant, I'm talking about a different kind of elephant, they will think of an elephant. And in the case of an elephant, that might make sense, but in the case of spirituality, a term where we don't really know what the meaning of it is, it's kind of silly to be bringing too much baggage to that. And yet I had one commenter going, shouldn't you use another word? Why use spiritual? It has so much baggage. And I want to address that baggage. But I think I should be able to say something that contradicts what you think spirituality means, especially those of you that are sort of anti-spirituality. And you should be able to listen that, oh, maybe I mean something else by it. So, for example, the biggest example, the most important one that you guys, if you want to understand me, you can think whatever you like about spirituality, and it can lead you to a certain conclusion about, whether or not my way of looking into this is going to be useful or not. But if you want to understand what I am saying, you will have to understand that spirituality is not about life after death to me. I believe that's bullshit, that it should be taken that way, and bullshit that it ever has been taken that way, because, I think there's a historic reason to, I think life after death based religions, everybody thinks that's what religion's about. No, that's what slave religion is about. And that is so that the slave will keep working his ass off. Well, you always got to get at least one bug in your coffee and take it out, right? I wonder if I could set that down. I'm bringing up spirituality, and as far as I could tell, I said some specific things that show that it's not about life after death. Looking into spirituality, the way I've looked into it, and the way I've described to you guys, and I've had this theory of spirituality for a couple decades, it has nothing to do with some preconceived issue of life after death. Okay? And, some people were reacting, sometimes I wonder about being spiritual because I lost somebody. It's, maybe there's an indirect relationship to that. There's an indirect relationship to everything in life, probably. But think about it. I said, I believe there is a feeling that is unique, just like hunger and lust is unique, just like disgust is unique. Lily likes going outside. Lily, why don't you listen about spirituality? Oh, because you're already a fully spiritually realized animal? I see. And I said a very tangible method, and this is how I would investigate any of those other feelings. It's a feeling. What's going on when you have it? What causes it? Possibly what kind of actions does it motivate? Right? Does that sound like it's about life after death? Hey, when you have a spiritual feeling, or when people have reported spiritual feelings, have they been dead? They're usually alive. I think it has something to do with the human animal. And I don't believe in metaphysics. I think the question of life after death is silly the way we ask it. Because the body obviously rots. There's no soul. I believe that the mind is a body. It's part of the body. It's the body. Are we asking if the personality goes on? Well, I don't know. Maybe you can read the memories from a dead brain. Is there life after death? Well, no, life and death are distinct. And do you disappear after you die? No, the body is right there. Does your personality go on? Does it separate from the body and run off? I don't see any reason to believe that. Do we reincarnate? Well, I don't see much evidence that we have memories from a previous life, and yet the carbon molecules in my body go back into the system and can be ingested and likely will be ingested into other living things. Does that count as reincarnation? It's not what you're asking when you ask those questions generally. But just to be clear, this topic might touch on that like it'll touch on many things. But that's not what I'm asking either, right? Now, the other thing is the glorification of this. Now, I have been doing this for quite a while, and I have an idea of what this feeling, the spiritual feeling, is. And I believe it can lead a lot of people astray. I think there are gluttons for the spiritual feeling that sort of force themselves into it all the time. Kind of like, there's gluttons for the feeling of love, and sometimes they misidentify feelings as feelings of love, or they trump up feelings of love because they're desperate for that. So I'm going to reason by analogy with other feelings. I realized there's some issues with doing that, because I've been using hunger and lust as an example for a long time. In terms of when I do occasionally make videos on this. And I realize the problem is that you're all not very introspective. You all don't turn your eye on in your brain. I think a lot of people don't realize that you can do that. Okay? But since I was a little kid, I've had this idea. I remember when I was around 11, seeing this chart of the train of thought. It was drawn as a train. I realized that's what I like, looking at trains of thoughts. I don't want to know just what the issue is at the end of the train. I like, how did it get there? Where is it going? One of the first memories I have of falling in love with physical science was a little pamphlet about momentum. And it didn't just say, what we thought of momentum currently, but a lot of the theories that had led up. Like, for example, there was one physical theory where people had thought, well, you throw that thing in the air, and it's pushing the air out of the way, and the air's whipping around like it will, and it's hitting it in the back, and that's what keeps it going. I'm interested in theories like that. And I'm interested, and when I think about science, I'm always thinking about all these errors that have led up to our current situation, which keeps in mind that we're making errors right now we just can't describe as well as errors we made, 150 years ago. So, all y'all, even some of you that are very smart and that I would just naturally assume have a power of introspection, don't. So when I'm referring to the character of a feeling, or being able to distinguish one feeling from another, a lot of you haven't done that. It's kind of like somebody that deals with, somebody that's a painter can distinguish, blue and cyan. Whereas other people, I'd have to show you on a piece of paper with those two colors, how they're distinct, And then you might go, oh, well, it's just different shades, and I'd have to go to the physics to go, well, no, actually, the fact that they even look similar is a neural feature. Somebody was saying I worry too much about Lily, but I love Lily. Was it Heithel today? Which is funny. But anyway, so I'm referring to these things, and yet I do want to refer to other feelings by analogy. So you're going to have to try to be a little introspective. That is necessary to understand me really in anything that I talk about. Maybe it's why you guys don't get me sometimes, because I refer to introspective features of the mind, ones that I have seen other people experience, but that doesn't mean they were looking at them. I could see they go through it. I see people have the feeling of hunger and that they have the feeling of lust. Doesn't mean that if they were, if I could just project those feelings into their head, they could tell which they were having. And indeed, some people think of lust as a kind of hunger, and hunger is a kind of lust. And so, cyan, blue, who knows, So that's how I'm going to approach this, though. And so, in the feeling of hunger, right? The feeling of hunger. Let's say I don't know what is that feeling? Sure, often I want to eat, but sometimes I want to eat this. Sometimes what is that feeling? And say it's, 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, and I have no idea about nutrition. I know more about the fact that I want to eat and other people want to eat. And if it's been a while since you eat, you have a stronger urge to want to eat. And you get very hungry. But I don't necessarily know that I'm going to die if I don't eat. Right? I might feel that some metaphysical theory that the reason I'm going to die is because the gods want me to use and interact with the bounty of the earth. And that hunger is an urge to satisfy this desire of the gods. I might know nothing of nutrition. All right. But now here's the key point about looking into spirituality based on starting with the spiritual feeling and looking at what's going on when that happens, or when it's reported, or when people think they want to have it. Hunger, clearly, I think we have a big handle on why an animal, a mammal, feels hunger. People doubt whether animals, other mammals, have feelings of love. We pretty much understand hunger is such a tangible thing, hooked into the mechanical nature of the universe, that people pretty much acknowledge other mammals feel hunger. Whereas they will doubt that they feel love or disgust and things like that we don't have as good a handle on, and therefore we can't picture it in other animals as easily, right? So hunger is there to drive you to keep feeding yourself for nutrition so that your body can get energy, right? By analogy, it's the same with lustful attraction. Is there. It might feel like the desire to power and dominate, or any number of things, is there because the DNA wants you to procreate. Love at first sight is because the DNA doesn't care if you're deluding yourself, it just wants to make sure you procreate. Is it really the person that's right for you? Not necessarily, but the DNA'd rather roll the dice than not roll them at all. Right? So hunger. It's there so that you survive. And yet, a lot of people in this day and age see hunger as a threat to their health. What an irony! Because why? Because the feeling of hunger makes you want to eat, and it can become fixated such that you have a strong urge to eat things that aren't actually healthy for you. Now, mind you, if you're starving, they'd be more healthy than the death that would happen from starving. People can talk about McDonald's hamburgers are unhealthy, but that's compared to something more healthy, not to starvation. All right? So hunger is there to keep us alive. That doesn't necessarily mean that the investigation into hunger is super flattering to hunger, right? Because now in a society where we're having enough food, the hunger is not flattered by this investigation. We're like, I'm hungry, what am I going to eat? Cake. And it's not nutritious. So the idea that the feeling of hunger is there to make us eat nutritious treats is blown away. And indeed, it might be quite the opposite. In a world of nature where lots of the foods don't taste so awesome, hunger's there to make us eat them anyway, so we don't starve. So spirituality is not predestined to mean anything. And there's certain things it's likely to not mean using this investigation I suggest. Right? Now, nobody that's ever reported a spiritual feeling was dead at the time that they reported it. We're going to not worry about near-death experiences because y'all are fixated on your fear of death. No, I don't actually think that's spiritual. I think putting spirit there and wrapping it up with your fear of death is a way for you not to be spiritual at all. So it's not going to end up being flattering to spirituality necessarily, and it's certainly not going to be flattering to your current idea of spirituality, right? To look at what is going on in real life when people have or report these feelings. We could discuss, and it's funny to me, nobody's really brought this up, what is that feeling? Because people know that just like there's a feeling of disgust, there's a feeling that you have of beauty, there's a feeling of hunger, there's feelings of lust, there's feelings of confusion. There is a feeling of spirituality, a spiritual feeling rather, and it does have its own characteristic, its own emotional thumbprint. And yet the first thing that we really should be doing is asking ourselves how to recognize that feeling, and if the feeling is somehow an illusion. Is it a recipe of other feelings, right? Like sweet tarts have a feeling. It's really a recipe of sweetness and tartness, and it's really a recipe of whatever it is, the 5 taste buds and the aroma aspect of taste. It's a recipe of feelings that come from sense organs that taste things from the physical world. And so we should be asking if spirituality is something like that. And I've been looking into this, and I think, no, it's a particular feeling of its own. It's one of the primary ingredients, like hunger and lust. It's one of the primary ingredients. And the question is, why have we evolved to have it? Now, is it going to be an illusion? Does it lead to illusion? Well, all feelings seem to. All feelings, certainly left to their own devices, gone crazy. If you're a glutton for a particular feeling like hunger, it's going to deviate from its justifiable evolutionary purpose of keeping you eating things and trying to eat things that maybe that aren't sweet and attractive automatically to you. All feelings seem to have that characteristic gone on to themselves. So, what is the healthy way to use a spiritual feeling for your own good? That would be like, how do you have a good relationship with your hunger so that it doesn't make you a glutton? And to do this, you have to be able to recognize feelings in the first place and distinguish one shade from another, right? So we could discuss whether that's possible or not. Is it possible to recognize feelings and what feeling you're having? Now, having done this for decades, yes, I have some ideas about spirituality, and I don't want to be coy about them. But one thing that I found that is contradictory, one of many things that's contradictory to how all y'all seem to think about spirituality, is that you can follow this spiritual feeling and do really terrible things, right? And there's examples of if you're a violent type of schizophrenic as opposed to a peaceful kind, you can have this spiritual feeling firing and telling you to do really wrong things. And when I brought up Hitler, Hitler was very interested in these woo-woo kind of topics, and I believe it likely that he had spiritual feelings driving him to do some of the crazy shit and lending him the confidence. And yes, he believed this metaphysical feeling that there was a fate coming in his direction. And so he ended up on fire in a ditch on his honeymoon, which is funny because it was Hitler. So you got to be cautious. It certainly is not just a matter of, it's a good feeling, so follow it. Just like hunger. Hunger is a good feeling. Hunger will make you try a tomato when you think it's poisonous and finding out, oh, not only is it not poisonous, it's nutritious and it tastes great. Okay, motivating people to try. You know, it's the DNA getting humans, scared little humans, to go ahead and try stuff. Now, what is it in spirituality? You know, and I really do have the question still open, but I have some answers, right? Some answers of what I think, you know, it might be about. And I'll just leave you with one example. It seems to have to do with big picture things. One of the most reliable ways I've found to provoke this feeling is to go to a really expansive vista. And whether it's of a jungle or a desert or even a city or anything, there's a good chance of feeling all these intricate details and how they all hook together and feeling I'm one of those details. It's a big picture emotion. It's an emotion that makes us enjoy the big picture. And in the sense of humans having gone all over the earth, and this idea of that people get the spiritual feeling sometimes that there's some sort of there's an oasis, there's a Shangri-La out there for them, and they're driven, I know across that mountain is the magical drinking of blah. And they'll create a whole explanation, and really it comes back to why. Because they looked at those mountains and had a spiritual feeling where they visualized a lovely place beyond them. And what was really going on was it was overcrowded where they were, let's just say hypothetically. And in order to take that risk and to not react like smart creatures and fearful creatures, they were driven to go on this journey. And guess what? There was a place they could survive over there and that was lovely. And that's the DNA rolling the dice. Because somebody else had the same feeling and went over that way and died in the snow. So I think that spirituality might have to do with getting little tiny individual specks of dust to look at the big picture. Right? And if humans are particularly able of having spiritual feelings, and I think all mammals can have this emotion and have this emotion. That's just my guess, I don't know. But I do think that it's one accessible to other mammals at least, and maybe other types of animals in general. But if humans are especially able to have it intensely, yeah, probably because of the brain, and we formulate these big plans, and that's how we managed to spread over the whole globe in just a few tens of thousands of years. So, so that makes spirituality look like, a kind of insanity, this rolling the dice to connect us with the bigger picture, right? And yet it does mean that it could be quite a positive thing, because we need to get the bigger picture now. And my goal, here's the thing I'll say too. I will cop to the fact that I think to have healthy nutrition, you can't ignore your hunger. I'm a kind of person that can easily ignore hunger, and I've found that no, you have to have a good relationship with it. If you want to have a good diet, you want to use it positively. I believe that spirituality, a healthy spirituality, comes from having a good relationship with this feeling of understanding it, not being a glutton for it, but also not ignoring it and not being separate from it. I think a bunch of slaves wanting to have a slave revolt need to rely on the spiritual feeling. I think this is why when you see people oppressed, why they end up resorting to their religions and their spiritual practices, including going too far and becoming fanatics in it, is because the big picture is that you cannot live as a slave. And the fact that you cannot fight a slave revolt without individually dying requires some extra motivation that is in the interest of the DNA to ensure that the individual can call upon. And I think spirituality is that feeling. And of course, this is why Gary is so frightened of it, because he is vested in life not looking worth living, and that in the big picture it not be worth living. And ironically, that's something that that he might have come to think of because of this spiritual feeling, and just realizing a sense of meaning that was empty, right? So, you know, I know people are going to watch this video and still go, yeah, but with spirituality, so you believe in ghosts? No, I believe that there is a feeling that we feel, and things are going on. There's a reason, there's experiences that are triggering that feeling, right? And it's something akin to hunger and disgust and feeling a sense of aesthetic appreciation of beauty and love. And there's all kinds of reasons for these various feelings, and they always come back to we are creatures with a body living in the natural environment, and somehow this feeling has played a role, or at least slipped through the cracks and managed to survive, because it's compatible with survival as we've experienced it so far. You know, and some of those feelings need to be cut down way a lot, because our situation has changed, and luckily we're evolving, and luckily we have brains and social and mental evolution, so we get to have a hand in that. If there was never any Lamarckian evolution in the past, well, there can be now, because we're making decisions that will impact our evolution. And if spirituality is one of these feelings that needs to be cut out, fine, but I think we will have to understand what it means before we do that. Just like to cut down and limit our feeling of hunger is only a viable thing because we've come to understand what it means, how it can go awry. And frankly, I don't think we cut out hunger is no good, because like I say, I'm someone that could ignore hunger, and that's not good for your nutrition. We have to have a healthy relationship with these feelings that are like fire, you know, that are like fire. Can be good or bad. And so this video brought to you by the sound of dog footprints. Cheers. Are you showing me the way home, Lily? Is this the part where you lead the way? Because I like that, because then we could go anywhere, and I know I will find my way home. Because Lily, you never get lost. Do you? It's like walking in the water. Water's starting to get stagnant, Lily. What kind of mosquitoes are we going to get? Don't know. We've never been here before.